Selectmen had posted a meeting tonight to hear and discuss the warrant articles, so we set the table up for them, but we won't need that? Okay, so we probably won't need that. We are set for them if they do indeed end up having to meet. With that, I'll invite, is there any public comment from anybody on the committee?
I have just a brief comment. I'd like to acknowledge the very untimely passing of Pat Barney, a retired Lunenburg police officer. He was a member of my brother's class. I knew him the whole time he was growing up, and my deepest sympathy goes out to both the Lunenburg Police Department and obviously the Barney family.
Thank you. Any others? Okay, I did want to make a public comment at this point just to announce that there will be an informational symposium on October 29th. It's a Tuesday evening beginning at 6:30. It will be co-hosted really, by the Finance Committee, Board of Selectmen, and the School Committee. There will be presentations by Adam Birdie from the Land Use Director, the Town Manager, Heather Lemieux, and the School Superintendent, Dr. Kate Burnham. Just to give a broad overview before we get deep into the budget process of where the town has been, where it is now, and where they anticipate it's going. So when we start to look at the budget, we can take it in the context of what the town is trying to build on going into the future. It just helps us to get a better sense of what that's about, and we appreciate their willingness to do that. That will start at 6:30 at the Lunenburg Middle and High School auditorium. It will at least be recorded. It may be broadcast. I'm not really sure yet, but it will at least be recorded. And that's all I have for Finance Committee announcements. And with that, is there any public comment from anybody in the public? Seeing none, and given that Heather's going to be the bulk of the presentations tonight, so I'll start with the Land Acquisition Committee, if that's okay. You can have another cookie, and while you wait. So we have Brandon Kibbe, who's the chair of the Land Acquisition Committee and also the Open Space Committee. And this is going to basically be, and this is the public hearing, so again, if at any point after the information is presented on any article, if you have a question, make yourself identified, come up to the front, put your question through the committee to the presenter, and we'll try to get your questions answered before we close the public hearing on the special town meeting warrant. So, Mr. Kibbe.
Thank you very much. Again, name is Brandon Kibbe. I live at 146 Rolling Acres Road, chairman of the Open Space Committee and chair of the Land Acquisition Committee that was tasked with reviewing the potential acquisition of the Saliba property on Northfield Road, which is what I'm here to discuss with you this evening. The project has quite a bit behind it. I'll do my best to go through a rather comprehensive presentation this evening to try to tell you a little bit about sort of why the Saliba property makes sense in the context of the open space plan, why the property, what rises the property up in terms of its value from a conservation and recreation standpoint, and then talk a little bit about the financials that go behind this proposed acquisition for conservation and recreation purposes. Try to paint a pretty broad picture of the opportunity, and then be available, obviously, for questions if you have any. I apologize if I'm talking to the slides and sitting down for this one. The selectmen, there was all kinds of technical difficulties of standing up in front of the podium, so I think this will work a little bit better.
So let me just ask, everybody can hear him okay? You can hear him? Okay.
Okay, great. So the Open Space Committee got together in May of 2018 to revise and update our open space plan, which was last done in 2011 and had expired. The 2011 plan was a plan that was approved for 5 years and the 2019 plan, actually revised, will be approved for 7 years. And the open space and recreation plan is a requirement for a number of different state grant opportunities, which is one of the reasons why the town engages in it. And like any good planning process, it's really intended to help guide open space and recreational opportunities and assess the needs. There's a lot of dense information on this slide, and really the point of it is to say that the Saliba property meets a lot of the goals and objectives that are outlined in the plan. And part of what the Open Space Committee has done is actually established a set of guidelines for how to assess acquisitions in terms of what should the town consider when opportunities do arise. There's a list of 6 different criteria that we list, and we say for a property to be considered, a parcel should meet at least 3 of those. The Saliba property meets 5. But what I'd like to impress upon people is that the open space plan isn't a plan that sits on a shelf and collects dust and was created by a small group of people sitting in a room with the door closed. In fact, it was quite a public process, and just for the record here, you'll see that where the Saliba property fits in the context of the town, where the red stars are. But the open space planning process was actually quite open and public. It wasn't just public meetings by the Open Space Committee, but there was also input from multiple town boards and departments that were engaged in that process. And we had those the draft plans reviewed by outside organizations and agencies as well to review. But the biggest portion and the thing I think we're most proud about how we created this is the amount of public input we were able to solicit to help guide what we saw as the needs of the town. So we actually created a survey, circulated that survey, went out with all tax bills. So everybody would open their tax bill, a survey fell on their lap. We had online surveys, we had, you could download it off the town's website. We had the Survey Monkey, they were available at the library, they were available at the town. So we got a very good response rate. 9% response rate when 3% is generally considered a good response rate for that kind of action. We got a 9% response rate. And the feedback we got in that survey was actually pretty strong in favor of conservation and open space acquisition. These charts are divided by color by how long the residents who responded have lived in town, just to give you an idea of who was responding to these surveys. So at the bottom of these graphs are blue, these are folks who've been in town for less than 5 years, red 5 to 10 years, green 10 to 40 years, and anybody who's a lifelong resident knows that you're not a lifelong resident unless you've lived here your entire life. And so lifelong resident in purple, and then those who did not respond in terms of their years of residency in that light blue at the very top. You can see people move to Lunenburg and live in Lunenburg largely because of the rural atmosphere. The types of resources that they use, I'm always very proud of our town, how heavily we use our public library. You can see that's the tallest bar there in the center right of this graph. About town conservation lands and trails. Nearly 60% of residents say they use those resources on a very regular basis in the center left-hand portion of that graph. These are the types of needed new recreation areas and improvements to existing recreation facilities that are needed. You can see conservation areas, very highly rated there in the center left of this graph. Hiking trails and ski trails and trail maps on the very right side of this graph, very highly rated. And folks believe that we need more opportunities for adults and seniors for recreational opportunities, places to go for a walk and feel safe. And this, I think, is a striking one as well. We asked what residents would be willing to do for open space and recreation. Obviously, donate land to the town, right in the middle there at the very bottom of the response rate. Well, not that many people have land suitable for donation for conservation and recreation purposes. I'm sure that drives that response. But on the far left of this graph, you see over 60% of town residents who responded said they'd be willing to support town acquisition and vote for that at town meeting. So we left the open space planning process, and the reason we drafted the goals we did is because we felt there was a pretty strong mandate from the public to pursue these opportunities when they arise. And the Saliba property itself, and we'll talk a little bit more in terms of the resource values that are there, meets 5 out of the 6 criteria for acquisition, so it's a really good opportunity. And at the end of the day, the deal we put together with the Land Acquisition Committee, it came to be a very excellent value. And I think, hopefully, over the course of this presentation, you'll appreciate these 3 main points. First of all, a brief overview of the Saliba property. The Saliba brothers purchased this property in 2003 as an investment. They did not enroll the property in Chapter 61 to take advantage of property tax shelter that large properties have the eligibility for. And part of that reason was because they had full intention of going forward and developing this property. It's 318 acres in total on Northfield Road. If you're familiar with the stretch of Northfield Road between New West Townsend and Chase, Settlers Crossing golf course is right there in the middle, and the Saliba property actually wraps around the golf course on both sides of the street. So on the holes 7 through 9, there's 59 acres on the south side of the road, and holes 1 through 6 on the north side of the road, there's 259 acres. The 259 acres northerly of Northfield Road also has frontage on New West Townsend and on Howard Street. There's connectivity through that property all the way from Northfield Road to Howard Street with good access and existing trail networks. There happens to be about 22,000 square feet. New West Townsend Road goes right along the town line with the city of Fitchburg, and the road kind of wends back and forth across the town line, and so there's a little incidental square footage that's actually in the city of Fitchburg, technically. There's a fascinating mix of interesting habitat types and geologic features. There's wetlands, there's upland forests, there's a Pearl Hill Brook flows through a portion of the property. There's these tremendous bedrock outcrops that really create a tremendous amount of wildlife habitat, and it's a part of a very large contiguous block of unfragmented interior forest. So if you think of Howard Street on the north side, Chase all the way to the east, New West Townsend on the west, Northfield Road on the south, that block that's in between all of those roads is actually one of the larger unfragmented interior forest blocks in the town. And as I mentioned, there's this existing trail system that goes through the property. There was a home on the north side of Northfield Road in the very center of this property that was eventually razed and removed by the Salibas in 2012. But there's a long driveway that goes up in the center part of that property, and then old farm roads that go throughout. So there's this tremendous amount of accessible trails that are already in place. And when I say accessible, I mean trails that are accessible by people of limited abilities. You can walk up that driveway very, very easily and get deep into the center part of that property and enjoy it. So it's a really interesting opportunity for adults and seniors as well. Then there's the 59 acres on the south side of Northfield Road. That's the most developable portion. That's a portion of the property that was most recently part of the Highfield Village development proposals that were put forth. Right now, until the town got the property under agreement, that parcel was divided into 4 lots and on the market as 4 large residential lots. Rises gently to the south, and there's a large flat area that was an old agricultural portion of the property that's quite developable. And then the property was actually harvested for timber resources in 2012 as well. So there's a log landing right near the road frontage, which actually serves as a pretty nice little parking area as it stands currently. And the current total assessed value for both pieces, for all 318 acres, is $996 $1,900, nearly $1 million total assessed value. Quickly, some maps to give you an overview of the property. The north side of Northfield Road, you see where it says Stagecoach Road, and you can actually see the two little dark dots right next to where, the A and the G in Stagecoach there. Those were that was the homestead that was located on the property, and that gives you an idea of how far into this land that old road goes. And the northerly part here is outlined in red, and the southerly part is outlined in pink. And on this USGS map, on the south side, you can see where it's white, where near the R in Lunenburg, that's kind of vertical there. That's the old agricultural fields that were, I guess it was a blueberry farm, from what I understand, until a couple of decades ago. Here's an aerial map to give you a sense of the property. The light blue there are obviously streams, or I hope it's obvious, and the other squiggly lines there are wetlands. This is state supporting natural landscapes. These are habitat types that are designated as highly valuable habitat types in the state. So you can see the northerly section of the property is almost entirely covered by this biomap supporting natural landscape, very important habitat type. And then you can see the light blue on the east side that flows through the frontage near New West Townsend Road is actually Pearl Hill Brook. Pearl Hill Brook is a designated cold water fishery, which means it supports important native aquatic habitat types. And the tributaries, therefore, that feed across the Saliba property and into Pearl Hill Brook help protect that water quality as well. In orange on this map are areas that are identified as critical for protecting natural resources in a climate-resilient manner. These are areas that were identified by the Nature Conservancy for climate resiliency. Again, the north side of this property is important for climate resiliency. And then on this map is environmental constraints. And what I draw your attention to mostly on this map are all of the various blobs of red that are focused on the north side. Now those red blobs indicate a very close depth to bedrock and bedrock outcrops. And you can see this density of these bedrock outcrops is really high on this piece of property. From a habitat perspective, if you're just looking at this from a habitat perspective, that creates a really diverse habitat type. Lots of nooks and crannies and things that all the critters like. And so it's a really interesting, you take all these habitat components together and you put them together, it makes it a really interesting piece from a conservation standpoint. And then there's connectivity. The light green on this map is town-owned conservation land. So you can see town-owned conservation land to the south and to the north. The dark green, once you get into Townsend, to the north there is Willard Brook State Forest. So you can see there's connectivity through this property into all that additional conservation land. One of the items that came out in the open space plan was connected trails, the ability for people to walk longer distances, not just go to one little place and walk in a circle and leave. They want to go to somewhere from somewhere. I showed you that map of bedrock. Some people will look at that map and say, well, that just means you can't develop it. There's no way you can develop that. And this property has been attempted to be developed a number of different times over history. Highfield's most recent, this was the Blueberry Estates that was done, I think in the middle 90s. And you can see the effort that people put forth to think about the developability of this property. You know, the early 90s when the real estate market was booming, people were thinking that this kind of thing would work here. The north side is on the left side of this slide, and the south side of the property is on the right side. Obviously, it did not get built. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's not buildable. You know, that's an economic driver. That's not necessarily something that's site constraints. And I always think about this property that I drive past in Hopkinton from time to time, where you can see the bedrock is coming out in front of the house, right next to the house is coming out, and they put it in there. The economics of housing development in Hopkinton is different than it is in Lunenburg today. But that's not to say that the economics in Hopkinton won't be what the economics are in Lunenburg some point in the future. This property, the Saliba property, is not developable. It's not economically viable to be developed at this time. And that's the difference. So this is an opportunity to town, and an opportunity that we're exercising our will and being proactive and not just reactive. Again, the property is not in Chapter 61. So if the Salibas went to sell this to another party, the town would not have a right of first refusal on this property. And so we were quite lucky when the Salibas came to the town in February of 2019 and inquired about our interest in this piece of land. It didn't take us long to go through these maps and go through the open space plan to realize that this was an opportunity we ought to consider. And we approached the Board of Selectmen to consider creation of a land acquisition committee to look at this opportunity and explore it with the owners. So the Selectmen appointed Finance Committee, a select board member, Planning, Conservation Commission, and Open Space Committee to form this land acquisition committee specifically to focus on the Saliba acquisition opportunity. And when the committee first got together, we looked at all those benefits that I just went through, and we said, you know what we really ought to do is focus on the north side of the piece of the property. That's where all the conservation value is. That's where the best hiking trails and all that other good stuff are. And let's allow the south side to be developed. They have a plan for 4 residential lots. Let's allow that to happen, and let's go forward with just the north side. The Salibas said, thank you very much, but we're really looking at selling the whole property, all or nothing. We went back to the table and said, well, geez, that south side really doesn't make a whole lot of sense for conservation purposes, but it is developable. And it is right next to other recreational lands, the golf course. Maybe it would make sense for that to be additional recreational lands. One of the things that came out of the Open Space and Recreation Plan was the need for additional playing fields, the additional need for rectangular playing fields. And so we went to the Parks Commission and asked their opinion, see if that was something they would be interested in, and in fact it is. So we went back to the Salibas and said, okay, if we can make this work, and by make it work, we mean make it work financially, we can put together a deal where we protect the northerly 259 acres for conservation. We acquire an essentially land bank for future recreational development, the southerly 59 acres, and maybe we have there a balanced approach that meets multiple different needs that are outlined in the Open Space and Recreation Plan. And they went for it. And we inked the final negotiated agreement in June of 2019. And that agreement is subject to town meeting approval, which is the purpose of this warrant article, and subject to our ability to secure state grants to help offset the price, the purchase price to the town. Assessed value we already discussed is $996,900. We had the property appraised. The appraisal came in slightly higher, not uncommon. $1.11 million was the appraisal. So we have an assessment, we have an independent appraisal of 1.11. We actually have a negotiated agreed price of $775,000. 22% less than assessed value, 29% less than appraised value. It's a good deal. Furthermore, we applied for 2 state grants. And I'll discuss them in a bit more detail on the next slide, totaling $500,000 that would offset that total cost. So the total cost, all in with additional closing costs and the like, for the town would be $282,000 for 318 acres of conservation and recreation lands. It's a cost of $887 per acre. A little bit more on the state grants. The Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs has 2 different grant programs that they offer to municipalities that if you have a current open space and recreation plan, you qualify to apply. Lunenburg qualifies at a 64% reimbursement rate, so we can get up to 64% of our total costs back through a reimbursement through these grant programs. The land grant for conservation purposes maxes out at $400,000. The park grant for parkland acquisitions for small towns, we qualify as a small town under that program, max out at $100,000. And then, once you acquire those properties, park grant can also be used for development of those properties at a future date. So you can go back to the park grant for a maximum of $400,000 to plan and develop that area into developed parkland. So there's more money available in the future for these types of, for the development side of this. This is really just focused on the acquisition. The applications were submitted in June of 2019, and I'm glad to say that the grants were awarded in September. And Lunenburg successfully was awarded both grants at the maximum amount. So we get $400,000 for reimbursement through the land grant program and $100,000 through the park grant program. The key here is it's a reimbursement grant program, which means you need to allocate the full acquisition amount, actually purchase the property for the full amount, and then apply for reimbursement, and then the state sends you the money. So the town meeting warrant article actually authorizes us to spend the full $782,000, which we would have to carry for a short period of time, and then we get the $500,000 back, and we only have to long-term borrow, or however we decide to fund it, for the remainder of the $282,000. Lunenburg has a long history with these grants. We've gotten 35 of them in the past, 33 of those all before 1975, so we were very active in acquiring properties for conservation and recreation purposes historically. The last two were in 1999 for Hunting Hills, and then in 2014 for the Lane property on Holman Street. Here's an overview of the budget. Acquisition price $775,000. Some incidental additional monies to get us through closing, an estimated total project cost of $782,000, minus the $500,000 in state grants, total cost to the town, $282,000. And in case you were wondering, $500,000 is pretty much exactly 64% of the total project costs. That's not an accident. We were very strategically negotiating this to try to get, and we said very clearly to the Slebas during the negotiation, we are not going to spend any more than we can absolutely max out in the grants. And that's what helped us drive that price so far down. We expect the fiscal year 20 carry cost to be just under $2,000 for the short-term carry, and then bond service would begin in 2021 on the $260,000 roughly balance. A 5-year bond estimates about $60,000 per year, and a 20-year bond estimates are on average about $17,000 a year. I put this slide on here because some people will say Lunenburg has enough conservation land, and I don't know what is enough conservation land. Everybody's going to have a different opinion on it. Massachusetts Audubon Society produced a report called Losing Ground that was published in 2013. And this just shows you how Lunenburg ranks compared to other municipalities in the state, 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts. And you can see our rank in the state in terms of our overall area that's protected, the overall percentage of Lunenburg that's protected, the overall amount of that biomap core habitats that we discussed is protected. The amount of the TNC resilient land that we discussed that's protected. You can see we're in the bottom half of communities in Massachusetts. Do we have enough conservation land? I don't know the answer to that, but we certainly have less than most. So we see the Saleba property acquisition really as three things: strategic, proactive, and cost-effective. Strategic because it provides linkages to other existing town lands. It focuses really on the most essential, the most critical habitats. And it's a balanced approach to meet town needs. It's not just conservation, it's also recreation lands. It's proactive. This is a negotiated deal. We're not responding to a Chapter 61 withdrawal that has a developer working with the landowner that sets the purchase price. This is a fully negotiated deal that allows us to manage the timeline, to control it. We set out with the landowners that we would have certain items that we have to meet, milestones that we have to meet. And if we don't meet them, we set them free. So we had to apply for the state grants. We did that. We had to get the state grants awarded. We did that. We now have to go to town meeting. We're doing that. But that's all allows us to work on this on our own timeline. And it's cost effective. I can't say that enough. I mean, this is a good deal. And I'm proud of our committee for the way we negotiated this and our ability to bring such a good deal to the town. Now, it's up to the town to make the decision, and we hope that they'll see the value in this. And part of our efforts here is, obviously, we met with the selectmen a couple nights ago, and we're trying to get this out in front of folks on cable access as well. We're obviously speaking with Finance Committee for the same reasons, and we're holding 2 public site visits to actually tour the property around with anybody who's interested in coming to take a look. So we'll meet on Saturday, October 19th at 10 a.m. on Northfield Road. I think it'll be hard to miss the crowd that gathers out there roadside. And Sunday, November 3rd, also at 10 a.m. In advance of town meeting. And the warrant article, again, just to summarize, authorizes the town to purchase approximately 259 acres for conservation under the care and control of the Conservation Commission, and 59 acres for recreation under the care and control of the Parks Commission. It authorizes expenditure of up to $782,000, which is what we're required to do to close, and then it's offset by the receipt of the state grants that we've already been awarded to the tune of $500,000. So the total cost of the town will be $282,000 or less. And with that, I'll take your questions.
Anyone on the board have questions? Mr. Passos?
Yeah. Brendan, do you know what use restrictions are placed on the property in relation to the grants that are used to being used to offset part of the purchase price?
So the language is basically what I just described there. For the conservation purposes, it's as defined under MGL Chapter 40, Section 8C. So there are certain restrictions. A property that's under the care and control of the Conservation Commission is permanent conservation land. It cannot be converted to other uses. The purchase, and it'll say that right in the deed. If a town ever goes to undertake what they call a conversion of conservation lands, that requires, it's not impossible, but it requires a 2/3 vote of the state legislature and the signature of the governor. It also puts you on the naughty list for these state grants and makes you ineligible for future state grants. So there's that restriction. In terms of how the town would use the conservation land, we could continue to use the property, obviously, for recreational, passive recreational purposes. We could conduct forest management on the property if there was any types of revenue that we could generate in that manner to further the property management out there. But in terms of building a public works facility there or even building a playing field on the north side of the road would not be allowable.
Could you speak to motorized recreation on that property?
So motorized recreation, ATVs and the like are not allowed under conservation restrictions, but snowmobiles are an allowable use. So it's not just an elimination of all motorized vehicles, but some motorized use, such as snowmobiles, would be allowed.
I only asked that question because I think a lot of people, when the Lane property was purchased, thought that the understanding was no motorized at all, and then lo and behold, a few years later, we had snowmobile trails being improved and so on, and I understand what you just said.
Yeah, and if people had that, then they weren't listening, because during that lane acquisition, we were very clear the entire time that there was a multi-use trail through the center of that property that was intended to be used for snowmobile access. We were very clear about that in that entire acquisition.
I thought if we highlighted it tonight, that would bring
Yeah.
that same
Good, thank you for
openness
that.
to it.
Yeah, and I do believe there, I mean, a portion of the trail, I did see, there were what looked to be snowmobile markings, trail markings out there. So I assume that a portion of that property already has snowmobile
I believe
access
there's
on it.
conductivity through that property to other trails.
Yep.
Mr. Beauchamp?
First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Outstanding work on your part and the part of the committee. Outstanding presentation tonight.
Thank you.
And I have a few questions. First of all, can you send me a soft copy of this slide?
Sure.
Question on the legalities of a property that actually crosses the boundary line to, thank you, now I have two microphones. Question on a property that is designated for conservation that will actually cross a boundary line of the town into Fitchburg. Are there any concerns or legal things that we need to be aware of when doing that? If the town owns property in Fitchburg and is applying conservation rules and regulations to that property?
It has not been flagged by town council to this point, and town council has been involved in this conversation all along, so to my knowledge, no. The city of Cambridge has their water supply in Lincoln. The city of Fitchburg has their water supply in Ashby and Ashburnham, and so...
I believe there are municipal agreements in place in both of those examples between the towns that account for that.
That may be, but again, the town council is aware that there's this sliver of property and has not raised any concerns with that at this moment, so.
Okay.
But town manager's here and, okay.
Okay. Is the grant money appropriated
Excuse me, yes.
in the current fiscal year?
Yes.
Okay. What is the anticipated transfer date of the property?
The purchase and sale contract outlines the latest closing date of May 15th. Given that we have, the grant program requires, one of the reasons we had to take this to special town meeting is the grant program requires town meeting authorization before the end of the calendar year. So we had our hands somewhat tied with that. Our expectation was we weren't going to have the grant awards known in time for town meeting, so we're quite happy that we do. And we were expecting to find that out sometime after the new year, which is why we pushed the closing date out to May 15th. If we are able to secure town meeting vote this November, we may be able to advance that closing date, and there's no reason why we shouldn't, unless there's a financial reason that a case can be made for us to want to delay it. The sooner we can close it, the sooner we can submit for reimbursement, the sooner we get the money back from the state. You and I both know that the state can change their mind on budgetary things, so we want to make sure that they promised us the money and we have it.
When the property does convey, will that immediately go into the auspices of their respective committees, the Conservation Commission and the Parks Department? Is that
Yes.
just part of the transfer?
It's actually in the deed.
Okay. That's it for my questions.
Yeah,
Thank
I'd
you.
like to,
Mr. Henshaw, go ahead.
Brendan, first of all, we echo Peter's comments. Excellent presentation, very
Thank you.
comprehensive. A couple of questions about the downstream costs of, starting with the playing fields that are, you say, perhaps we can put some playing fields, rectangular playing fields, I assume you mean football, soccer, on the southern part, 59 acres. And I want to know if you've had, how much those would cost, if you've done any work on that?
Have done no
And
work on it.
associated parking lots.
We actually have done no work on that. We haven't had any, we kicked around the ideas of trying to get, somebody, even just to plan it out, just to, give us some rough ideas. And the reality is the objective here at this moment is to buy it
Sure.
and land bank it. And so if we don't do anything there for 20 years, that doesn't change the fact that it's still available for those types of uses. So there is no mandate in the acquisition that says thou shalt develop it as playing fields by XYZ date.
Great. Regarding trails, you mentioned at some length, you described at some length a long driveway. And then I gather there are some other trails throughout the property, one of which connects with one of the Pearl Brook in Townsend.
Yes.
And that's wonderful to know. Trails mean that there's got to be some trail maintenance occasionally. What does that entail and how much would that cost?
Well, trail maintenance to date on all of our conservation lands has been done largely by volunteer work. So we've had a long history of a relationship with Lunenburg Snow Riders as one example, and then just good neighbors and good stewards that go out there and make sure that if a tree's across the trail, it gets cut up and moved. And so we have a number of conservation areas in town where the trails are well-maintained as a result of volunteer action, and I expect the same to be true on this one.
Well, I certainly, from my experience, at say Burr Street and Cowdrey and Pleasant Street, the conservation area, the trails are wonderful. And they are, in fact, I didn't know they were maintained almost entirely by volunteers. It's kind of impressive.
Yeah.
But I know you all cut up trails, and so for a road duffer like me, I don't have to climb over fallen trees too often, which is
Yep.
nice.
It's really a wonderful resource we have in town, and it's terrific that it's, our conservation areas are spread out really well dispersed throughout town. So we all have conservation areas that are relatively accessible and not too far from where we all live, which is
So
really good.
basically, what I'm left with is that the main cost is going to be the $282,000 financed, and that there's going to be the other costs will be manageable over time if we decide to do them or not.
That's right. And, the Conservation Commission has begun a series of forest management activities which can generate revenue for these types of activities. Also provides a certain amount of management, so it helps build parking areas. The old log landing can become a parking area. So there's different ways to, approach the management of the property. Again, to go back to the Lane example, that property was acquired we added 168 acres to about 325 existing acres of town-owned land that was essentially inaccessible. When we acquired the Lane property, we got road frontage as a result. The Lunenburg Snow Riders wrote a grant to the Mass Trails Grant Program and got a terrific grant that built the parking area and built a bridge to get over the Mulpus Brook and into all that. So we ended up with this, there was an existing trail network, and then through the partnership with the Snow Riders, ended up with this fantastic parking area and this terrific bridge that gets you into that entire network of trails and properties. It's really
Impressive.
fabulous.
This last is going to sound gratuitous, I don't mean it to be, but we would, if in fact we do decide to purchase this from the Saliba brothers, we will be foregoing property taxes that they pay on the property now, which is about, I think around $19,000 a year, if I'm right. with the,
That's correct.
I think that's it.
Yeah, about 9,000 on the north side, 9,000 on the south side.
Yep.
Okay. Just to put that on the record.
That's true. And as I said, the selectmen, and I think it was Ms. Adams that pointed out, if we didn't acquire this and the next owner were to acquire it and simply put the property in Chapter 61, say they put it in Chapter 61B, open space, they would get a 75% reduction by statute in their property tax. So that $18,000 or $19,000 immediately becomes quite a bit less if somebody does that simple action. So the property tax savings, or expense is actually, somewhat up in the air in terms of how that would be handled. And the other important aspect, and I made this point as well, is that when you think about towns that, we talked about towns, how Lunenburg compares to other municipalities. You think about towns that have high densities of conservation areas. You think about Princeton. You think about Harvard. You think about Lincoln and Cambridge. And these are the towns that also have very high property values. And, if you look in the real estate section of any real estate listing, if a piece of property abuts conservation land, you can be sure they mention it, because it's a value to be next to it. So what happens when you add additional conservation land to municipalities, the abutting properties raise in value. And so that can have an offsetting factor as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any questions? This end? Mr. Passios?
One other comment, and we spoke about individually about this a little before the meeting. It's important to realize too that there will be a borrowing cost for that money over whatever term it's borrowed. I personally would like to see us pay it off in the second year that we own the property, and there is a mechanism to do that, but we'll go into that some other day. Best I can ascertain, I think I have the right number. If we financed that amount for 5 years, it would be in the realm of somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 in interest costs. Just so that everybody's aware that it's just not the 282. If we do borrow, there is an interest cost to that also.
Good. Any questions from anybody in the public? Okay, Brandon, thank you very much for the presentation.
Excellent.
And then basically, I will say that, if another opportunity comes up for someone from finance to sit in on a land acquisition committee discussion and process, it's basically, it's a good learning experience, and I would encourage you to take my seat.
I think you've done an excellent job. Peter Beardmore.
Okay, so, yeah, I like your screensaver. So, I think what I'd like to do is go ahead and move on to Adam, because I think you're only up here for the one warrant article that takes 8 pages. Is that about it? Yeah.
That would be me.
Okay.
Couldn't find your name tag earlier. Was it, do you keep it or something?
It hasn't been made. I never had one.
Okay. And I know that this basically is going to a bylaw change.
Somebody made one.
Section 140 of the Code of Lunenburg currently is 3 articles. The first article being earth removal. This bylaw that governs the commercial removal of earth within the borders of the town. Over the past 3 or so years, there's been a lot of discussion about is our bylaw contemporary? Are we capturing everything? What happens when we bring earth in? Where does it come from? How do we govern that? So, my thought was
Should I say it all over again?
Say it all over again. Faster.
So, Article 1 of Section 140 of the general bylaws governs earth removal, commercial removal of earth. This is an update to that, and it takes it a step further, and it includes earth fill. So, over the past 5 or so years, there's several communities, one close to us, that have had some issues with earth being brought in, used to fill properties that was of questionable origin and questionable cleanliness. So this does 2 things. It addresses that as it would with anything else that you bring in, but it also governs changes in topography and level of ground and how that might affect abutting properties. It strikes the entirety of Article 1 and rewrites it. It adds new definitions. It raises the threshold. Currently, our bylaw requires that you pull an earth removal permit if you remove more than 10 yards, which is essentially 1 dump truck. So the threshold gets raised to 500 cubic yards. which, again, we get away from someone taking out just some earth in their property and more to the commercial removal of earth. Currently, we only have one company that holds an earth removal permit in the town of Lunenburg. They hold several earth removal permits, so they would fall under this. There's a clause, there's a section in there about transitioning from existing permits to new permits. It increases the length of the permit from 1 year to 3 years and allows renewals for 2 years. Earth removal is a long-term business. There's not a lot of people who get in and get out. Usually you're removing significant quantities. It takes time. And the Board of Selectmen over the last 2 or 3 years has spent a significant amount of time getting a handle on the earth removal permits we have. This bylaw proposes to transition that process to the planning board, who's generally more equipped to handle plans, reviews, that kind of stuff that goes along with this. There are exemptions in there for standard things that you would expect that people should be able to do without needing it. Foundation holes associated with building permits, septic systems, removing earth within a property. So if farmers were tilling a field and they were moving a significant amount of earth from one piece of their farm to another, that's not earth removal, that's moving dirt within a property, so it's exempt from the bylaw, those kind of things. I mean, I'm happy to answer questions, but that's kind of my quick version of it.
Well, I guess the gist of it for me would be, within the body of the bylaw changes, is there any potential financial impact that somebody would need to be concerned about? To the town, let's say
Not
to the town.
Well, I don't believe so, and I say that every time I'm up here, because in general, the bylaws aren't changing the town's finances in any measurable way. They're governing the use of property. So we're laying out a set of rules on how people do certain things in town, and it's, I guess, analogous to zoning. We did the use table update, and we set the table for the potential that there are more uses that people may take advantage of, and the town may benefit from that in the long term through tax revenue, but that's all a big maybe. And it's sort of like economic development. There's so much the town can do, but we can't go out and force people to come in and open a business. So I don't think there's a direct, there isn't a physical cost associated with it.
Okay. And basically, does the bylaw cover whether somebody applies for permission to remove, does it change the status of a piece of property that might be taxed at an open space rate?
No, I don't believe that it does.
So somebody could do that and use the property for...
Oh, you mean if somebody had a piece of property in like a 61 and they wanted to then perform earth removal on it? I would have to look in that, but I believe that that would be a change in use, which would remove them from the 61 process.
Okay.
And there are certain things, like on an agricultural piece, if someone came across a significant mound of gravel and they wanted to remove it in order to prepare that for agricultural activity, the two might be compatible and they may be allowed to perform that use within the agricultural use, but they still may require this type of permit. But they wouldn't be able to say, I'm going to sell my farm to John Stone and Gravel, and they're going to come in and they're just going to strip it bare, but we're going to keep it in 61. I don't think that would fly.
Questions from anyone?
Yeah, Mr. Burning, haven't we had a incident where what you just talked about possibly being allowable was actually done on a piece of property? Removal of a
Yes,
sizable
I
amount of
believe there
material.
was a property that is in the 61 program that removed a significant amount of material, and as I understand it, then replaced that material with a dense loam to be able to prepare fields for agricultural planting.
Okay, so there's no regulation of that as long as it's preparation of agricultural land.
Well, I believe that if they're removing the fill and using the roads, it would be subject to this bylaw, and perhaps should have been. My understanding of the situation, I believe you're referencing, is we were notified of it at the terminus of the project, and there was no visible or viable evidence that we could go back and document that would trigger any sort of action.
Okay. Yep. You have the right incident, I'm sure. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I do, just a couple. First of all, kudos to the planning board and yourself for the work that you put into this. I've watched some of your meetings on YouTube, and my hair still hurts from some of those conversations. I do have one question about enforcement violations and penalties. Or a comment, I guess, which maybe you could comment back. The numbers seem small to me, considering the amount of money involved in these type of businesses. Is this limited by statute?
It is. So, while I would agree that number does seem small, that would be something that the legislature would need to take up and amend the general laws to change.
That's it.
That's it. Any questions from the public? No questions from the public. You are, so before I release you, was there another one that you had to
No,
speak to?
that's all I have
The only
tonight.
one? Okay. Then you're free to go.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you. And now it's all Heather, all the time. The town manager is pretty much the bulk of it. As I'm looking through this, I don't see anyone from the sewer commission here, so I expect we're not going to hear anything on those two articles. Oh, actually, there's 3 articles for the sewer commission. So those should be a quick vote to wait until we hear them at town meeting. Let's see. And again, going back through, I believe that there is no one else that we need to hear from at this time beyond the town manager. So,
All right. Good evening. So we'll start, so they're still numbered, lettered at this time, and after Tuesday's meeting, when the Board of Selectmen sign the final warrant, that's when they'll change to numbers, because there may be a couple that will be removed. So Article A is the budget adjustment article for fiscal '20. And so if you look at the chart, oops, not on.
disappearing ink.
Yeah. People at home can see it. So 1 second.
At least it's in focus now.
Yeah,
You good? All right.
it is.
Small numbers, but so I'll walk through the adjustments. So the adjustments are based on the final state aid figures, which we have, and new growth, which reflects the expected decrease from the figure that was used at the annual town meeting. Our actual new growth has not been certified yet, but the calculation provided by the assessors that will be submitted to DOR will be $18,387 less than the estimate used at the annual town meeting. The changes to the fiscal '20 budget that will be voted on at the special town meeting include changes to debt principal, interest, and temporary interest accounts that reflect a reduction of $89,427 for principal for the ladder truck and $15,377 of interest for the ladder truck, and an increase of $90,000 for the principal for a pay down of the middle school, high school band that we're required to pay down, and an increase of $19,995 in temporary interest for the middle school, high school band. So another adjustment is to reduce the assessor's administration budget by $12,000 by moving forward with the state assessing software instead of the software that we included in the budget for Vision, which is a more expensive software. And that will be, those funds will be used instead for tax title. I don't know if you remember, but during the budget season, the treasurer collector had wanted $25,000 for tax title for all the properties to move forward for foreclosure, but we were only able to fund $12,000. So this will bring that up to $24,000 for tax title. And moving these properties through the foreclosure process, we'll recoup the back taxes, penalties, and interest for people who don't want to see it foreclosed. They'll pay those amounts, or the town will assume ownership in the end, and we can auction that property and get them back on the tax rolls. And so overall, the net effect with the changes to state aid, new growth, and debt payments that are excludable debt, and there will be a surplus of $78,604 available for appropriation. And so these all numbers hinge on new growth, which we don't have certified yet, so this is based on that. Any questions?
Mr. Beardmore?
Is there any reason to believe the new growth number will not be certified as submitted?
No reason to believe, no, that it would be different.
Could you offer some color to the changes in the middle school, high school band issue? I'm sorry, I'm just kind of coming into this midstream, I think, so I'm not,
Yes,
as best you can and as briefly as you can.
Karen is probably a better person to answer this question, but I'll do the best I can. So the MSBA is undergoing their audit of all the expenditures. We expected that should have been done probably in the fall. We would have been able to go out to permanently borrow for the project. Instead, we've had to roll the ban, and this is a required pay down on the ban, the $90,000, to roll it one more time, because we won't be able to permanently borrow
Got it, okay.
till the
Right, because
closer
essentially
to the end of the fiscal
You have to pay
year.
down the principal to some degree over time, is it? Is it?
Yes, you're required to after, I think you roll it twice.
Karen?
Karen?
After 2 years, you're required to do pay.
You can just take a mic till you see it. Right.
We originally issued the ban for the school project when we issued the ban, we issued it in January of 2017. It came due in, am I getting these dates right? Wait a minute. Yeah, we issued it in 2017, and so after 2 years, you're required to do a pay down that's equivalent to 1/28, because you had the ability to bond it for 30 years, and you've had a short-term bond for 2, so you have to pay down 1/28 of the original ban that you issued, which was $2.5 million.
Okay. And is that money coming out of excludable dollars, or?
It goes towards the excludable amount. Yeah, so over.
It's from the excludable levy?
Yes.
Yeah, any interest in any pay-downs that are required on any short-term notes that are exempt borrowing are part of the excludable debt calculation. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
And then as of right now, the current surplus available, nobody's looking to spend it.
Well, we haven't got there yet.
Just give us a minute.
Getting it. And the ladder adjustment, that makes sense as well, because we
sorry, which
will not
ladder?
receive the ladder
Ladder.
truck. Originally, the ladder truck payments for principal and interest were in this year's debt schedule. That will be pushed to 21, because will not have the
Don't have
ladder
a
truck
truck.
until April. We'll borrow for that after.
That'll push us out one more year on the other end also.
So you said November 21?
I do have one more question, I'm sorry. And this is a continuation of 2 weeks ago's discussion about free cash. the current surplus number that you're showing there, that excludes the rolled over unappropriated free cash from this year as well, right? That
Yep,
excludes
something
that.
completely separate, yep, this is, yep, excess levy capacity.
Got it.
Okay, so we can move on to Article B.
Okay. Article B is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer a sum of money for the purpose of converting our streetlights to LED lights. And there are two options. So going back, we requested back in June from Unitil, what would be the cost for Unitil to convert the lights to LED? And secondary, for the cost for the town to purchase those lights from Unitil and convert them ourselves. So the first option for Unitil to convert the streetlights to LED, and they would retain the ownership. This cost is $65,493. And the total budget, because this was a question posed by the Finance Committee at the last meeting, for streetlights is approximately $73,000 that we pay annually for streetlights. Unitil is projecting a savings of $31,598 out of that $73,000. I talked to another town today, Townsend, who recently converted their streetlights, had Unitil convert them. They're saving 50% of their cost. The other option was to pay Unitil $87,646 to purchase the streetlights, and this would require us to go through the bidding process to select a contractor to convert the lights, so that there's a cost to that. We would be eligible to apply for a Green Communities competitive grant, which this is applicable expense for that grant. And there's also a long-term cost of having an annual maintenance contract once the work is done. There's that requirement to monitor the system and maintain it. And so this is still under discussion. The Green Communities did meet, and I think their preferred option was to purchase the streetlights, but this is still under discussion.
All right, so basically, when this is presented at town meeting, how is it being presented?
That's to be decided whether...
So we won't know until then? Okay.
Yeah. Right now, we don't have the funds to, we have available $78,000 under raise and appropriate, but there would be an additional cost.
Sure. I'm sorry, did I?
Yeah, I just have a question about if we pay Unitil the $87,600 and own the lights, does that translate to a larger cost savings and operating cost? And how much?
That's why the Green Communities Committee, I think, is recommending option B.
Yep.
Is that there would be a greater savings in the long term, but I think there's maybe additional analysis that would have to occur. From the town side, I see an added cost to town departments.
Yep.
Because they would have to be the ones that would be handling the contractor, dealing with the person that's handling the annual maintenance of the lights, and
And we still have to pay the cost of the electricity? Yes?
yes.
In either
Yeah,
case, we
but
can
it's-
agree.
I mean,
Right.
basically, it's not a case of we're throwing a solar panel on top of each of the LED lights and hoping that...
Yes, it's just a
yeah.
lesser cost, yep.
I just have a procedural question here. So the way this is written right now, it's for the purpose of converting the town's existing streetlights. It doesn't say to purchase, it actually refers to the town streetlights, which the town doesn't own. So I guess my question is are you anticipating that this will be reworded before it's printed? Once you
This
decide
has
which-
been reviewed
which
by
option?
town council, he had no changes to the wording.
Okay.
So basically, what we're looking to do, all right, so, which is interesting, because basically you were
It's asking for
Yeah, you don't know if, because...
Funding
Yeah, you were
to
asking for
convert it.
funding
But it's-
to
it's
convert, but if we're
converting,
also
but
going to purchase,
There's
then that's
no,
different.
there's no purchase involved in the
Right.
wording of this document.
Yeah, because basically this just says that we're going to convert, it doesn't say that we're going to purchase them first.
But wouldn't you have to purchase them to convert them? I mean, that would be
No.
the
No.
first step to convert
No,
them.
the way-
If
Option
everything
A
would
doesn't
go.
require
Option A
you.
doesn't require a purchase, it requires, we would fund a conversion, but it,
A part of which would be a purchase.
no.
No, that was option B.
Well,
So there's two
all right,
options.
because I'm looking at the article, I'm not looking up at that.
Yeah, no, so basically, what, the first option is to have Unitil do it at a cost of 30-some odd thousand.
Yeah, no, I think I get that.
Yeah.
I was literally reading this. I think that's where the description.
Yeah, I think that basically, at this point, the cost to convert them is not in the warrant article at all, because basically, what would have to happen first would be the purchase of them. And then, there's nothing to say what it would cost to do the conversion within the article.
Right.
So, that would be what people would send out for potential grant. And absent the grant, then that would be basically spending $30,000 to $40,000 to do the conversions on our own. So, if Unitil could do it for $30,000, then I would assume that if we bought them for $80,000 and then converted them using a different contractor, that it would still cost about the same.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The expectation coming out of town meeting is that the voters will be asked to either purchase and convert, or convert.
I think going to town meeting, we'll have a recommendation for one.
One or the other.
Rather than the other.
But it's a purchase and convert is one option, as your version B. Or just convert, pay Unitil to make the conversion
Right.
and then see the savings over time. Okay.
No, and I see your point.
So I really think that the wording of this needs to be changed to reflect purchase if that's the avenue that we plan to go down.
Yeah, otherwise you're not covered to purchase.
With respect to determining the avenue we plan to go down, have other towns, do we know if other towns have done the purchase, gone the purchase route as opposed to the conversion route?
Yes,
and-
there wasn't, I think, it maybe Fitchburg had.
City of
yeah.
Fitchburg purchased. Yes.
Wonder if they would know, if they would have any cautionary tales or some experience.
They did.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say this, I mean, this has been being discussed since at least Carrie Spidell. So, and I know that it's been, I remember the discussions at that time when Fitchburg was going through the process, and Carrie was trying to get information from Fitchburg about how that was going for them. So, there's probably, there's going to be cautionary tales, and there's going to be success stories, so it's, and Fitchburg is just so much bigger, probably has so much better access to funding mechanisms for that, but I think that, yeah, it is a good point to make sure that if we're asking people, if people want to purchase them, then I think that part has to be clear, and that the total cost is not just the purchase cost, so, and I think you were trying to make that point, so. But that's an interesting one, and I can, again, like, I have to say that, I don't know how many years I've been on the Finance Committee, but that was the first year I was on. I know that that was, I'm not even sure if that didn't make it to the warrant article stage, but, yeah.
Yeah, and it made it on the warrant, just timing-wise, just really for discussion, too. So if it doesn't go to town meeting, at least, you know,
Okay.
getting this discussion going.
Yes, yes.
So there's nothing compelling this to happen in November versus May if
Only if we want to proceed with the purchase of the lights, and we want to apply for the Green Communities Grant in March.
okay.
Yeah.
So that would cause another year
Yes.
if we deferred. Okay.
Okay.
And then we would have to request an updated
You know.
version from Unitil, and it took from June to September
Wow, okay.
30th.
And that would be a good piece of information to have at the time of town meeting as well, yeah.
And either of these courses of action would allow us to apply to green communities. either buy or either purchase outright?
No, only the
Only
purchase.
only the purchase, okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on that?
I did have one, I'm trying to resurrect it in my brain. The maintenance costs, choice A versus choice B, there would obviously be ongoing maintenance costs whether Unitil owns them or we own them.
They still retain ownership, so they have complete,
Oh,
under
okay, so it's
option
at their,
A.
so their expense and option
They
A.
would, yep, still have to maintain.
Okay, and would they do any better job than they do now?
No response.
I didn't expect
Well,
one.
an LED bulb lasts longer. So theoretically, if you're dealing with mediocre service, the mediocre effects of that service would be
Diminished.
diminished.
I agree.
As long as you rolled out the change in bulbs, because basically if they all go at the same time, then
Right.
that would be painful.
That's a fair point.
All right, Article C.
I do have one more question. And I haven't had a chance to attend the meetings recently, Green Communities. There was a phased proposal back a year or two ago to change over systematically, or a proposal from one of the members maybe, to change over the streetlights systematically as they came to the end of their, I forget what the term was, but there's a useful life basically. Would this proposal for $87,000 do them all at the same time?
That would just buy them.
That would just purchase.
Okay, but I mean,
Yes.
And
in
then
that
they could roll
process.
it out, right. Then they could determine if they want to roll out the changeover, because we're in control of the changeover, because we have to do it.
Okay, so that's a moving target.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Article C.
Article C is the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund, so that's another option to put funding from raise and appropriate the $78,000 into the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund. The excess levy capacity, I do want to say that I would recommend it be a one-time expense, so not incorporating it into the annual operating budget, but a one-time expense like the special purpose stabilization or the streetlights would be another example.
When you say Special Purpose Stabilization Fund, that would be the capital?
Yes, so it was created a few years ago,
I know, I always
May
get trust
6,
funds. and-
2017.
Yeah, I always get them.
And puts it, the account was created for vehicle and equipment, but the purpose, you can change the purpose if you take money out of it, but just designating it. It takes a 2/3 vote to take money out of that account.
Assuming,
Go ahead, and I'll follow up.
okay.
Absolutely.
All right, assuming that Article B and Article C were to fail, would that $78,000 just roll to free cash?
No,
It wouldn't.
it would be not, you would not be able to capitalize on,
It would mean that it was not appropriated,
Right.
and if it's not appropriated, then it actually lowers the
It's
levy.
excess levy capacity.
excess
Yeah.
levy.
Mr.
Okay,
Passick?
my question kind of piggybacks off of that, in that $78,000 did not come from exempted, changes in exempted, budgeted, appropriated monies. It came from the tax levy, correct? Do I have that correct in my head? And we're
It
moving-
was, it became available as a funding source because of because our exempt debt increased.
Changes to the.
And the reduction of the ladder truck, too, was
But the
combined.
ladder truck was non-exempt borrowing, wasn't it?
Right,
My point being that we're moving it, we're saying that it's a one-time revenue source, but it's actually coming from the tax levy, it's not,
yes.
so it's not truly, as we say, the
So it's coming, basically what you're saying is that it's coming from the operational budget, not from capital.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
I know it's,
So traditionally, if we've had leftover capital, or we, as we will have, I would think, at some point here, with grants that are covering some of the capital projects approved for fiscal '20, that money was appropriated for capital, so will stay in capital by being put into either another capital project or the stabilization, of the special purpose stabilization fund. Whereas this 78,000 comes, in my brain, from a different source, the tax levy, and as you made the comment earlier about the LED lights, we don't have the total amount we need for the 87,000. Why wouldn't we take it from here if town meeting chooses to go with that proposal and approve it in November?
Because that was 87,000 and we have 78 available.
Oh, okay. I was thinking we had 78, I'm sorry, my head went in two different
Reverse the
directions at the same time. But the other thought I had when you said, I was thinking correctly when you said the 78,000, that we could supplement that, what do we need, another $9,000 to get it to the 87, say $10,000. A little further down here, there's some money available that we could shave a little bit off of, instead of tying it up into a special purpose stabilization fund or any one of those other transfers, use $9,000 to fund that, so we could do it this November if the town meeting chose to.
I believe those were the only transfers, weren't just sewer commission with the next.
Yeah, they're enterprise ones.
Okay.
To be clear, though, the $89,000 in Article B was specifically for purchase of the lights. There's an additional cost in addition to that. Say the same word twice. On top of that $89,000, should we choose that option, to actually purchase the LED bulbs and install them. So it's not $89,000 if we go down that route. It's $89,000 plus
Right.
30-odd probably in bulbs and labor and stuff.
I think
right?
it's much more than that. I think that last estimate I saw for the conversion was around 160.
If we were to do it.
And, yeah, if we didn't
And
receive the grant.
As far as you know, if we're able to apply for the grant and we were to receive the grant, would it fully fund or would it
I
be a
believe
matching?
it could
It could
potentially
potentially fully
fully,
fund?
yeah.
Okay.
All right, but in the meantime, if we spend the $89,000 and we buy the street,
Then we just own the streetlights.
we just own the streetlights, so that basically when a bulb breaks, we have to replace it. So that's,
Correct. Okay, now, that helps me. I didn't fully understand the two stages of that.
So that begs the question as to why are we even going through these motions, other than to bring it up for discussion?
Well, option A, the payback is about 2 years. If we convert, if Unitil converts to LED, we save 30,000.
as with
first
most everything else that happens in town, actually, one of the nice things about having the discussion is if the town decides that it wants to go with the Unitil option and does that, then that will address the question that's been going on for many years about who do we want to have do the conversion, because it has been being discussed regularly. And I think if the town decides to wait and go with the purchase, then they'll just vote no on a lot of it's going to depend on what the Green Community Task Force is recommending at the time of town meeting. So I think that there'll probably be some good discussion at that time. I think that there's not going to be enough information to make any kind of recommendation here.
I've been very vocal in the past that I do not believe we should keep Unitil involved in this project. So that's where I stand.
I also think that the interesting thing will be that the next time that there has to be any trimming of trees over the power lines, that's going to be us. Potentially. So, but anyway, that's the...
Good point.
All right, so did we finish with C? We finished with
Yes,
C.
so I just, this is just a chart to show what our expected capital is, at this moment in time, we haven't gone through the capital planning process, but to show what our 5-year projection of capital needs are that we could use the special purpose stabilization fund for. And on average, it's about 1.8 million a year, with it fluctuating up and down. And that's without, having any new ones come on, so.
You're projecting $3.9 million in fiscal year '21?
That includes all the Vertex study property condition assessment amounts. So that's why that's so large.
So some of that money's already been, that is not appropriated, that's
Those
downstream,
are
we gotta figure that out.
identified repairs to those
Right, okay, got
buildings.
it.
But potentially, a chunk of that is never going to be spent.
Or borrowed.
Right, but it's identified, yeah.
Correct.
It's identified as a
As a
need,
need.
it hasn't been voted as an appropriation. Michelle?
How much is in the stabilization fund right now?
The special purpose stabilization fund, 836,207. That's the last number I have.
Okay. And when was the last
Plus
time we
interest.
took money out of it?
We have not,
Okay.
we haven't used it yet.
I mean, basically, it was only initiated 2 years ago?
4 years.
4 years?
2017.
2017.
Oh, so it is only
Yeah.
a couple of years.
Yep.
All right, so then we move along to, are you going to be addressing Article H? Or are you going to be, you're not going to address the sewer enterprise, I don't imagine, are you?
The motion is just to correct, or the article is to correct the motion made at the annual town meeting for the source of funds. So it needs to, instead of transferring, or it needs to transfer $9,993 from the reserve capacity stabilization fund. So it's just a correction to that budget article.
Okay.
That's D?
That was D.
So it's just a wording issue? A wording correction?
Yeah. Funding, yeah, as well. Funding.
Funding.
The funding
The
was
source was named
overstated in one
Okay.
account and
from the wrong
didn't
account.
include one source.
Okay.
So, Article E, for the sewer reserve capacity stabilization, they do this on an annual basis. It's essentially transfers funds that were collected in the previous fiscal year and puts it in this reserve capacity fund. Article F, the collective bargaining agreement has not been finalized, so I have no figures to present at this time.
Is it
That's
likely
one-
that it will happen before town meeting?
That's the hope, goal.
Okay, so that may
Yes.
come to the floor at town
Yes.
meeting. Mrs.
Is-
Passios?
Is there a window that closes X number of days before town meeting so that the information is available before town meeting for review?
No,
So you could finalize the agreement on
Friday night.
the Thursday or Friday before special town meeting and,
not on a Friday.
Not on a Friday,
It
I'm
would have
sorry.
to be at a, selectmen's meeting.
Well, actually, it could be that Monday before the...
Have to be voted
yeah.
on by the selectmen.
okay, my problem is that there's no opportunity to review what was negotiated. Because my understanding is that if the voters at town meeting were not on board with what was negotiated, then if they do not approve the first year of a contract, it has to go back for renegotiation.
It would have to be voted again.
Okay. But without the information available prior, there's no way to know whether...
Yeah, I can't, we're doing,
Yeah, no,
Going through the
I understand
process,
that.
and it's a process.
I've always been concerned, because there have been other times over the years, even before you came to Lunenburg, that the agreement was very last minute, the vote was taken, and more or less the information wasn't disseminated enough so that anybody really knew what they were voting on until after the fact. How much the contract was going to cost over the term of the contract, basically is the most important number, I think, for anybody. Getting down into the nitty-gritty, that's negotiations, that's nothing, we as a board or a voter needs to really get into, but
Were that scenario to come to pass, town meeting does have the option of not voting or passing over the article.
That's correct.
And it would basically hold over and not go into effect until May,
That's correct.
correct?
It would have to be
Yes.
voted at the May town meeting.
Right, but if it was, well, that's correct, but if it were disapproved at special town meeting, then it would be
Then it would have to
forced
be-
back to renegotiation.
Not necessarily.
I don't
I want to,
know the answer.
and maybe that's a legal question that we can't answer here, but I think that basically, all right, so the reason why there is no line in the sand about how, is that because of the contract, or is that because statutorily, if
There's
they,
no requirement.
there's no
Yeah.
requirement to have an agreement until that time? So, I mean, it's a valid point that the information is not going to be out there, but it will be interesting to see how it does come to the floor and whether or not they're even ready to come to the floor. But yes, the notion that it could be passed over at that time, and the other potential is that since we won't necessarily have the information to make a recommendation, we don't, if, based on the presentation, we don't necessarily have to recommend approval. So, we don't have to recommend anything. So, you know, we can just do what we need to do at that time, so.
If I could make one comment, I'd just like to make it clear that I'm not picking on the policeman's contract. It just happens to be the contract that's coming up this time around at special town meeting. I've been concerned about the collective bargaining process and how we approve the first year of contracts for a number of years, seemingly with no information as to what's included in those contracts until after the fact. So that's what this questioning was born out of. Thank you.
H.
Okay, acquisition of 635 Mass Ave. The police chief and I discussed this. We're going to be recommending to the Board of Selectmen that we remove this article from the warrant.
Okay. Is there a particular reason why?
There is a significant amount of information that still needs to be
Okay.
accumulated to
Okay.
make a good presentation. Acquisition of 250 Howard Street. This is the right of first refusal property, and I believe this article will be able to be removed from the warrant as well. The selectmen meet on Tuesday regarding this. Open Space meets Tuesday prior to their meeting, and I believe they'll be passing over this request to purchase.
Okay. J.
842 Chase Road. So this article was previously voted differently at the November 28, 2017 special town meeting. And at that time, the town voted to accept a deed in lieu of foreclosure, so to relinquish the owner wouldn't have to pay the taxes, and in turn, we would get the property. They've since they would like the property to be a gift instead of not paying the back taxes, so they're going to be responsible for paying the back taxes on the property and would gift the property to the town instead. So it's just a rewording of the vote.
Will that money come in immediately upon the acceptance of this, or will it be financed and/or paid by some agreement?
They would have to pay it before we took ownership.
I'm not sure that totally answers my question, but I understand what you just said, but...
The town is not lending them the money.
No, I understand that, but is the mechanism intended to be a very short process, or could this stretch out over time to...
I don't think it would, yeah, I think all the back work has been done on the property as far as,
Okay, but the key point is...
Making sure it has a
when
clear
is-
title and
When are
everything.
all the back taxes going to be paid?
I would
Is
assume.
basically what
yeah.
I'm saying.
I would assume by the end of the year. I can't say for surety,
Okay.
so.
But the
But
intention
they
would,
would accumulate interest until payment, so it's in their best interest to pay them as quickly as possible.
so basically, at the time the town accepts this as a gift, the taxes will have been paid.
At the
Yes, that's
time
what
of
the
the
question-
vote, No, it would
Not
happen
at the time of the
thereafter.
vote, but basically at the time that the town receives ownership of it, because we don't receive
Yes.
it at the time of the vote. So when the title passes from the owner to the town, part of the closing of that is the payment of the back taxes.
Yes.
That will all, so that will all be finished at that time.
And that'll all be dependent, the reason they're doing this is definitely for a tax write-off of some sort. So whatever time frame is most beneficial to them is what they're going to be operating on.
Right, so which,
And I don't have the knowledge to know whether it would behoove them to wait till another tax year or,
yeah, and accumulate more interest.
I'm sorry, Peter?
This was approved as a tax taking at the last town meeting? Is that
in
correct?
tax taking in lieu of taxes. yeah.
Or in lieu of taxes?
Yeah, deed in lieu or of foreclosure
Okay, at the last town meeting?
at 2017, no, the special town meeting in 2017.
Okay,
A year ago, okay.
2 years ago. Suffice to say, the property never transferred?
Right,
Okay. Do we know what the back taxes are on that property?
it's about $7,000.
Jeez, okay.
Wow. When the town, if the town takes title to this property, what's the value to the town? Does it require the town to make some expenses to, about the property? To, insure?
It's going to be used for conservation purposes. So this is a property that was put forth by conservation
But recording of
because it
deeds-
abuts the small town forest.
Okay.
There's no building on the property that needs to be leveled
There's
or...
an old outhouse kind of building, but a 21E was performed. There's no
No hazards
no
or anything.
hazardous.
Okay.
And again, this was submitted by the Conservation?
Yes.
Okay. Okay?
All right. Should say amendment to the sewer service area map by adding 189 Crossroad to the Lunenburg sewer service area. So that, I'll pass on
Absolutely.
answering questions on that one.
Go ahead.
Is it one residence at 189 Crossroad?
Yes, I do know that they've requested multiple times to tie into the sewer, and they have a tight tank that requires an exponential amount to upkeep. So the sewer commission has agreed to do this after.
Because I remember from the budget season, there were 400, are they called licenses left? And is that going to come out of the 400, or do they get to add that one too?
I don't know the answer to that.
Does this present, do you know if this presents any, like, sewer line extension that would open to further development, or, like, are we bettering other properties by doing this, or?
There's one other property that could tie in, I think it's across the street, but they've been approached and they're not interested in tying in, so,
And there's a building on that property right now?
yes, I believe so.
There was a question, must have been a selectmen's meeting, as to what the size of their lot was, and would that give them the potential to subdivide that lot? Did that question ever get answered?
No.
Okay, that's something I'd be,
Yeah.
I'll ask the sewer commission when they do their
commission.
presentation, yes, thank you.
Whether the parcel, yeah, and the parcel ID is in the warrant article, so it can be, you can check it out on the assessor's map as well.
It's just, as you folks know, I will not be at town meeting, but I would strongly urge everyone to exercise caution on this one. There's a lot of wooded land around that property.
There's a lot of what?
Wooded land
Wooded land.
around that property.
Okay? Bill?
The amendment to the salary administration plan. So this article is to amend Chapter 70, the salary administration plans, to change the lifeguard position from a grade 1 to a grade 3, the position of public access production assistant to be added and assigned to grade 9, the position of recreation director to be added and assigned to grade 9, position of building commissioner to be changed from a grade 14 to grade 16, position of Council on Aging Director to be changed from a grade 11 to grade 14, and the position of the Assistant Town Manager, HR Director to be added and assigned a grade 16. And this article complies with the Salary Administration Bylaw to accept any new positions into the Salary Administration Plan at town meeting with their established grade as approved by the Personnel Committee. And the Personnel Committee has already approved these new positions to be added into the grid at the proposed grades and has already approved the aforementioned existing positions to be reclassified at the proposed grades.
I just have a couple of questions on that.
Please do.
So just to recap, when we had met last time, I had asked about different parts of it, and one thing that was specified was the lifeguard position was related to being funded at minimum wage. So that underscored why that was happening. For the public access production assistant to be added, was that part of the budget season last year?
It was part of their budget.
Okay, perfect. And then, is it possible to tell me, for the building commissioner changing from grade 14 to grade 16, like, what's the highest of grade 14 and then the highest of grade 16, just to draw the picture?
I would have to get the grid in front of me, so, I think it's around 37 to 40, and then 36 to 42, like,
Okay.
yeah, in that,
All right.
in that range.
All right.
Don't quote me.
Okay. And then the same for the Council on Aging Director, going from grade 11 to grade 14.
That, I can grab, I have the charts, hold on.
Okay.
All right, so the building commissioner, 3270, sorry, for grade, to 4021, and so that was the grade 14, and grade 16 is a 38 to 47, so it was a little off there.
And then the Council on Aging was grade 11 to grade 14?
Grade 11 is 2526 to 3106, and grade 14, 3270 to 4021.
Okay. Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just one follow-up. Heather, in your comments, you said this amending of Chapter 70 complies with the salary administration plan, so therefore, am I right to infer that it does not, this has no effect on, say, increasing salaries beyond what we anticipated them to be?
Right.
Okay, thanks.
So does that say that it was all budgeted, or some of it's coming from salary reserve?
The only one that would come from the salary reserve would be the Council on Aging.
Thank you.
All right, and then basically just to follow up, does this now mean that grade 1 is below minimum wage
It is.
and continues to be?
It is, and
And-
that's been a discussion of the Personnel Committee to how do we we should be paying our employees at least minimum wage. So how do we get there eventually?
So chances are good we'll be seeing a whole salary administration plan change coming soon.
Chances are, that's one of their big projects.
Okay.
They're looking at, so.
It's good to know. Any other questions on that one? No? Okay.
Article M, to amend Chapter 81, Town Meetings, to delete the closing of the warrants, the sentence, "All requests for the insertion of subjects in the warrant for the annual town meeting shall be submitted on or before 4 p.m. on the 42nd day before the date of the annual town meeting," and substituting the following sentence, "All requests for the insertion of subjects in the warrant for the annual town meeting shall be submitted on or before 4 p.m. on the 47th day before the date of the commencement of the annual town meeting." So this came about because the current bylaw, that date falls on a Saturday, and this would move it to the Monday preceding that Saturday. And that would give us time to assemble the warrant, and then the selectmen to review that Tuesday as well. We have a very tight time frame. I included kind of, so currently, like given this year, if we kept it on that Saturday, it would close on March 21st. And on Thursday, the 26th, the finance has their public hearing, and the selectmen have to sign it by the 31st. So that's literally, 10 calendar days. And
Special town meeting warrant closing is covered under charter,
under the charter, yes.
and that still states 5 o'clock. That wasn't changed, was it?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So this is bylaw.
This is a bylaw.
No, I understand that. I was just
Yeah, I
trying
was
to...
trying to get it straight in my head.
Yes,
It's interesting
and
why
the difference in the
one is on the
times...
charter and one is in the bylaw.
Yeah, it
Right.
is interesting.
Well,
One of
it's
those,
this is actually in charter, but it refers to the bylaw.
Bylaw.
That's all it says.
Right.
Yeah, it's easier to change the bylaw, so. Okay.
All right.
Yeah,
Article N, you covered with Adam. Article O is to accept Butterfly Lane as a town way. So the selectmen have a layout hearing on Tuesday, the 15th, to discuss this, and that's a process. We are required to have a hearing so many days before town meeting, and it has to be, the plans are on file. They're right now on file with the town clerk that show all the projected easements, and the planning board has released the subdivision bond based on the subdivision plan. So they complied with all the requirements of the subdivision, and the Conservation Commission has signed off as well.
okay, so, but there will be a public hearing,
Tuesday,
On
October
October
15th at 7:05.
so if anyone wants to hear more information on that, that would be where to go with that. Question?
No, just a comment, it's just a very short road. You know, it's like, so it doesn't, it's not, we're not, as a town, taking on a lot of, say, snow removal or anything like that, it's stuff like
That
that.
was my question, yeah, what kind of expenses are we looking at with it?
Less than a third of a mile by my odometer.
Okay. And it's just wooded on either side, or?
It's actually not, it's a little woods, but it's mostly cleared. And it's got it's a cul-de-sac and several houses there.
There are some added costs for the stormwater system.
Okay.
So there's two
think of that.
storm scepters
Okay.
and about 8 to 10 catch basins
Yeah.
on the property.
Okay.
So we would be required
Is
to
that the one
clean
that
those.
potentially
And a-
required a new piece of equipment because of the type of,
Currently, we, contract out for that. So it would be whatever the minimum cost would be to contract out for cleaning those.
Do we have an idea what that cost is?
The DPW director is working on that.
Will that be, that'll be presented then?
Yep.
Okay.
So there is a financial impact.
Yep.
Okay.
yep. P,
P is a non-binding vote on the old primary building for demolition. So this was something the selectmen decided to put forth to get just a non-binding, what the sentiment of the town is for that building.
And I think as the selectmen have talked about not having a recommendation, I think Finance Committee should take the same stance. That's my personal feeling. We're asking for an opinion from the citizens, not
Yep.
our recommendations.
okay, well, we're not deliberating yet, so.
We're going to deliver.
Okay. Article Q is a home rule petition for Section 15, which is a off-premise liquor license for Lanny Orchards. And so Article R is another request to petition for additional license for just an additional license not specific to a property. And the question was asked at the last Finance Committee meeting about how our quota would affect this because of the census. So for this type of license, our population would have to be 15,001 persons to affect our quota.
To affect our
Because
present...
it's increments of 5,000. And so when you reach 10, you get, 10,001, you get an additional off-premise license. It's different for on-premise, the quota is different.
But if we were to pursue this and if it were to be granted by the legislature, this would sit separate from the population-driven quota
Right.
in perpetuity.
Yeah, depending on how it's worded. So, and that's what the selectmen need to figure out. So there's 3 different ways a license can, so it can sit with that property. And if that person relinquishes the license, it could cease
Goes away.
to exist, right? It could follow that property, so it, if they sold it to another owner, it would be transferred to the new owner. They have to still go through the process of a liquor license transfer. Or it could be made just an available license if Lanning decided they didn't want it anymore for any parcel that met zoning requirements.
It would be available.
It could be. So those are the 3 different
So then it kind of
options.
increases our quota without hitting the quota, or hitting the number that we would need to
Yeah.
hit.
Is there one of those 3 choices, though, that counts against us when we get to 15,000 in population?
No, I don't.
No, we would
Yeah, I
still
wouldn't
get
think so.
one.
Yeah.
We would still get one more. Was public safety weighed in on this at all?
The additional liquor license? No.
Yeah, okay.
Now, this is a beer and wine only, or is this a full?
It's beer and wine off-premise, so meaning can't be,
Can't
They
be
can't-
consumed.
okay,
it's
so-
not a pouring
But
license.
not hard alcohol, just
Right,
beer and wine.
beer and wine.
Okay, so it's basically just buying it and taking it home?
Right, retail.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions? Okay, then we'll close the public hearing and we'll go through and we'll make our recommendations. All right, and we'll just go in order. Article A, and given the transfers that were shown, does anyone have any sense of whether you feel that you can recommend approval at this point, or if you want to hear more information, or, and again, this is basically to, all of the recommendations that we would make at this time will be what will be appearing in the warrant. If at any time during the town meeting, or between now and the town meeting, we want to change that recommendation, we would do that at the time of town meeting.
I would move that we recommend approval for Article A.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so recommend approval on A. I don't know, are you writing these down, or are we going to need to send them to you? You're writing them down? Okay. On Article B, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate a sum of money for the purpose of converting the town's existing streetlights. My sense is that we're going to want to wait.
Yep.
Yep.
I move we defer to town meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer a sum of money for the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund or take any action relative thereto. And that was the amount of the 70, no, that was, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, 78,000, okay. Do I have a motion on that one?
I'd like to wait to town meeting, honestly, myself. It's up to the committee. I would move that we defer to town meeting. Whether I get a second or not, I'm not sure, but
Is that, well, can I just ask, is that because you're curious about how B's gonna work out with the converting the lights? Are you-
yes, I think that's part of the driving issue.
Okay.
Okay, so B and C then, we would defer to town meeting. Okay.
Could we vote on the motion, or or
I
are we
will
just going to
second, I
defer
will
it?
second the motion.
Okay.
All in favor?
Well, can I just discuss for a
Discuss?
second?
Okay,
So-
we'll discuss.
I guess my feeling on this is that there's either going to be a sum of money or there isn't. It'll be $78,000, 78,000 minus 37 in a conversion fee, or zero. If it's scenario 1 or 2 of the 3 that I just outlined, we need to do something with that money, or it's going to be excess levy capacity. So my view is clearly there's a financial impact, and whatever the dollar value is, it needs to go someplace unless we believe that we want to have excess levy capacity this year. Perfect response.
I don't disagree, and I'm not arguing that we won't put money into the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund, but I would like to know what the exact amount is before, on town meeting floor, before we approve or disapprove.
Is there anything that would trigger this otherwise before town meeting, or do we have the time to wait? I don't know.
I think that, if we want it to appear in the warrant, it has to be tonight. Otherwise, we don't have to make a recommendation tonight. And we can discuss it further either at the next meeting or when we have more information on what is happening in B. I get the point about we need to make sure that it's appropriated somewhere. And I think that I don't have a problem with explaining our position on that if it comes up at town meeting to say we need to appropriate it and we're recommending approval, because if we don't, but if we don't have a place to appropriate it, we also have a problem in
Right.
terms of if B
And we need an
goes
article to do
down.
that, I guess is my
Right,
point.
right,
Like,
so
we don't have
if-
a lot of alternatives here.
Right, so if B goes down altogether, and we have the full 70-some-odd thousand to appropriate, then yes, it would be good to have the article in there and to have our recommendation that we want it spent. So we would, I think I get your point.
I guess my other point is, even if that number is 0,
Yes,
then we're gonna pass over it anyway, it becomes an irrelevant conversation, because there's no money.
right.
But
I get it. Yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah, okay, good.
Because because on C, you're not saying X dollars, you're just saying conceptually, yes.
it needs to
we'll-
go, to the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund, whatever that number is, whatever's left over, that's where it ought to go.
Right, because at this point, in the warrant, is it going to show the dollar amount that's there, or is it just going to say, from available funds, a sum of money? So no dollar amount, so actually that, all right, so,
So potentially, if someone were to make an amendment to A that uses up some of that money, we still end up with some number down to as low as 0, then we really need to be ready to put into that stabilization account, or it ends up as an excess levy.
That's correct.
As you're saying, Peter.
that's correct. So,
With that given, I would, I would agree.
all right, so will you withdraw
That
your?
it's a moot point either way.
Would you withdraw your motion?
I would, yeah.
And you'll
And I will
withdraw
go
yours?
second.
Okay, so,
I would move that we recommend approval of C.
do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I, okay.
Aye.
D, to see if the town, we're not gonna, okay, so D is no financial impact, but I think we might want to still wait for the sewer commission. I don't know what your feeling is on that. So we can either say that we don't find financial impact, or we can,
The fact that it's a source change, I feel hard pressed to say that there's no financial impact when there's a source change to dollars. I feel like we should probably defer this.
okay, so we'll defer, okay. I'm sorry, go ahead, Karen.
The only thing that happened with this article at the annual town meeting was the current year revenue estimates for the sewer enterprise fund in the motion that was read on town meeting floor was overstated by $9,993, and the sewer commission had intended to transfer that $9,993 from their sewer reserve capacity stabilization fund. So it's not changing the overall dollar amount for the sewer enterprise fund, it's just reducing the current year revenue estimate by $9,993 and taking that $9,993 from the sewer reserve capacity stabilization fund as a funding source for their 2020 budget. So that's basically what it is.
Madam Chairman, Nate, through you to the town accountant, would you recommend that we vote no financial impact or that we vote to approve?
I would vote to approve because it's not, you voted to approve the sewer enterprise budget at the annual town meeting,
Right.
and this isn't changing anything that was intended from the annual town meeting. It was just an error in the wording of the motion.
Okay.
Do I have a motion?
Given the expertise of the town accountant, I would I would move that we recommend to approve and defer to her expertise.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
So we'll recommend approval on D.
And on E, just so you know, I think Heather said it in her presentation anyway, but this is a transfer that they do annually. What they do is they take the money that they've received in revenue for reserve capacity and transfer it to their stabilization fund once the year is closed. So typically, we see this transfer at each special town meeting that we have in the fall. And that $7,513.66 is what was received in 2019.
And this is internal to the Security Enterprise Fund.
Well, it's so that they can pull it out of the enterprise fund and
Yeah.
hold it
Hold
in
it.
their
Sure.
stabilization.
Right, but it's not touching the
It's not touching.
It's not,
operating budget of the town.
Operating budget.
correct,
Yep.
correct.
Do I have a motion?
I move to recommend approval on Article E.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, and then we'll defer on the
Yep. We have enough information.
G. G was the Saliba property. Do I have a motion or any discussion on G?
I think there'll be some hearty discussion on town meeting floor. I think we should defer.
Is there any reason to do anything
Oh, wait a
now?
minute, this is the wrong one.
This is the,
Yeah.
this is the Northfield Road property,
Yep.
This
correct?
is Northfield Road.
I'm sufficiently convinced that this is something that we should do. I think that there are some downstream questions that are invariably going to come out of this action, such as, does it get financed over 5 or 7 or 20 years? Or do we go for a exempted mechanism to pay it
Capital
off?
exemption.
Capital exemption. But I'm not gathering that those are decisions that can be made until this initial decision is made to go through that process of acquiring the property. And in my view, this is one of those deals that's too, it's too good to pass up on. It's just a really good deal for the town.
Well, and from a technical piece too, I looked at the debt schedule to sort of try to figure that whole piece out, and there's plenty of room to take on the debt.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
We're not
take
even
on-
halfway
take
to
on
the
a
cap
piece of it.
on.
Yeah.
But
We can't
But
take
there's
it
a
on.
cap, there's a cap written into the financial policy that we're really not close to hitting, so, like, in a technical, well, on the current debt schedule, we have, the net regular debt service available capacity to reach up to 4%. We're not even at 2% of it, so,
yeah, I mean, I think the more pressing issue is
Yeah.
what is if this stays as unexempted funds, which it's likely to do, the debt service on this is either, if it's 20 years, it's $17-ish thousand a year, which is fairly nominal for the benefits that you get from a property like this. If it's 5 years, it's more significant. It's probably a head count someplace in the town. And so that's something that, I think becomes a more substantial thing to consider.
Yeah.
But you know, these are things that we can manage through the professionals that we have in town.
But there's the rub, even tonight, Dave mentioned that he'd like it to be discharged as quickly as possible to minimize the debt service costs, and I'm kind of sympathetic to that, but to the extent that we do that, we end up putting pressure on other parts of the budget, like say the capital.
Unless we exempt
Unless
it.
we exempt it.
Exactly, unless we exempt it, yeah.
And I would not be in favor of an accelerated pay down without an exemption.
I agree. I think we're both been on the same page with that since we brought it up the other day.
Okay, so just to come back to the particular article in terms of whether we want to make a recommendation tonight, I just want to also go back to, as we're making our recommendations, thinking in terms of what the policies of the financial policies are, that basically it's responsible debt, it can be responsible debt, it can be picked up that way. Does it hit the goals of the town, which basically it does, in terms of what people have put forward. So I think that our recommendation is really not based on whether or not we feel like we want the property. I think our recommendation needs to be based on, is this a good plan or value if people want to pursue property purchase? So I think that's really more it, that our recommendation isn't to say buying town land is a good idea. Our job is to say that financially it makes sense.
I think philosophically, we probably disagree on that point, because if we thought it was a bad idea, I think we would vote against it, you know, so.
But I think that if we thought it was a bad idea, we would think it was a bad idea financially.
But that's the barometer that we have to go by as a committee. That's what we sign up to as a committee, is to evaluate in that manner.
Right, so basically, I can say that financially, I think this is a good idea. I may vote against it on the floor. I probably won't, but basically, and that's happened, that we would make a recommendation one way or the other based on the fiscal policies and vote the other way individually, just because, you know, philosophically, we would have that view.
Probably not a philosophical debate will resolve tonight, but I
No,
don't see it exactly the same way you see it. But nevertheless, I think we're probably in agreement on this one, so.
Yeah, it's very possible. But anyway, I will entertain a motion.
I move that we recommend to approve Article G.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Do I have more discussion? I do not. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Oh, okay.
You're not opposed, you're saying.
He's aye. He said aye.
Just making sure,
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed, okay. So we recommend approval on Article G.
5-1.
No, actually, there were no
No,
no's.
John, you were a yes.
I was a yes.
Okay, I misunderstood.
A tardy yes.
Tardy, yes.
Tardy yes.
That's okay.
I was on the fence.
I'm kind of on the fence still.
No,
but-
that's okay.
No,
You know,
I agree.
No,
think it through, yep. There's absolutely nothing wrong with thinking it through. All right, and then H and I, we're anticipating will be removed, so we have no action on those. J is whether or not we want to accept is that the gift?
Yes.
it's a gift. Remove taxes.
All right, do we have a recommendation, or do we have a motion on that one?
I recommend approval.
Second.
Do we have any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 We recommend approval on J. On K, the sewer commission, or the sewer service, my sense is that I think I want to wait for town meeting.
I think this is a defer.
Yeah.
I move that we defer to town meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, salary administration plan. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the salary changes, the salary administration plan.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Do I have any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Jay?
Aye.
Okay. We recommend approval on L. M, town meetings, changing the time of the warrant. I would say there's no financial impact. I don't know how anybody else feels, but changing the time is tuned in.
I agree totally, there's no financial effect.
Do we need a motion on that, or not?
Nah.
Yeah, we never, board never has before,
Okay.
so.
All right, and then to see if the town will vote to amend the code of Lunenburg, I'm gonna basically not say that, I'm at this point thinking I'd like to defer, just to see if anybody does bring up an argument that there's some financial impact. I'm not sure that there is.
Neither am I, but I'll move to defer.
Yeah, just because you're not gonna be there.
I was thinking, it just didn't come out loud.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're deferring. The public townway at Butterfly Lane, do we have a motion?
I recommend approval.
I
Move to recommend approval.
I was hoping to get some figures on expenses. I think, is Jack Waterquins, did you say, presenting the
That's correct.
potential expenses? Yeah.
Okay,
All right, so then do you want to withdraw your
I will
motion?
withdraw my
All right,
motion.
so do you want to make a motion to defer
I make a motion to defer
the town meeting?
to town meeting, the Butterfly Way warrant.
I will second that.
So we have a second. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right, so you already said that P, you basically want to have just no recommendation.
That's my feeling, yeah.
Anybody?
P.
All right, basically P is a non-binding demolition of the old primary school.
I can appreciate what Dave is saying. I definitely can appreciate that.
In that it's non-binding, it doesn't have financial impact.
Yeah. Why are we getting involved here?
Because it's on the warrant.
I mean,
Well, basically, I think that basically, I think
We can
that,
bail out that way.
we
it
can,
will have financial impact at some point.
yeah, we can bail out on it, but as soon as we say there's no financial impact, then somebody's gonna stand up and say, well, of course there's financial impact, and the impact, and so basically, I think to not get into the discussion at all, this is just and I would just basically say that we just have no recommendation. I don't, or we could say no financial impact because it's a non-binding.
Yeah, no
It's like a
recommendation.
poll.
I move that we give no response either way on this unless we change them, well, no, that's what will be
I think,
printed.
well, we can,
No,
no financial impact.
no, that's not what I wanted. No recommendation. And have that printed in the warrant.
Yep.
Which can be done and has been done.
Can we say that, you know, since this is a poll question, we have no recommendation?
The selectmen voted no recommendation.
Then, yeah,
Dave.
no recommendation is
I
fine then.
second your motion, Dave.
All right.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm an abstention on that one.
The liquor licenses, or you're an abstention
No,
on
on the
On the
non-binding
demolition.
resolution.
Okay, so basically, we have no recommendation by a vote of 5 to 1?
5 to...
Five and 1 abstention. We vote yes.
Well, it's not a no, it's abstention.
It's an abstention.
5 to 0 with 1 abstention.
Thank you. All right, liquor licenses. I think, well, does anybody have a motion?
I don't see any direct financial effect.
We'll have, yeah.
Well, taxes, right?
Actually, no, because it's not drinking on site.
But sale, okay.
License fee,
What is the license fee?
it's around $1,000.
Okay.
Yeah, that is direct.
I think that there are some economic benefits to doing this that could have some feasible financial impact on the town. I don't think that Are we expecting a hearing on this, or is this, we have what we have and we're gonna hear about it at town meeting?
And again, what's the difference between
One is,
Q and R?
one is specific to Lanny and the other is a general one.
The general one, just to be held
up
in
for
advance for
grabs.
somebody else, yeah.
Right.
So,
Financial impact.
I guess my feeling on this is that first of all, Lanny's have been to the planning board and to the board of selectmen at meetings this year, on this topic relating to their need to find alternative sources of income and to diversify their their business in order to keep their property and potentially some adjacent properties in a commercial agricultural use. And personally, I think that brings great benefit to the town of Lunenburg to help them to do so in whatever capacity we can within reason. And in my mind, this is good citizenship to help at least the Lannys with this particular article. I do think that there is a potential economic benefit that could serve as a financial impact to the town. And I think it's something that we should support them on.
well, I agree with all of that, Peter. I just have trouble with whether it rises to the level of the FinCom actually weighing on us. To give you an example, at town meeting, when this comes up, I will vote in favor of it as a citizen. I just don't know that we need to put our oar in for this. The financial effect is so minimal. And you could argue that it could be attenuated by some increased, increased traffic or something, I don't know.
So for the purposes of response, several weeks ago, the chairman of the planning board came before the finance committee and announced that the finance committee is reconstituting an economic development subcommittee, or committee.
Yeah.
Under the auspices, I believe, ultimately of the
Planning board,
of the
right.
planning board.
Yeah, yeah.
Did I say something else?
FinCom.
Okay, planning board, it's late. And I believe that the discussion was that they wanted to invite a finance committee member to that board because they believe that there's a financial, there's a financial impact in economic development to the town. This brings the opportunity to bring 2 additional retail beer and wine licenses to the town that are going to have probably a substantial impact on 2 local businesses, which could have, substantial downstream effects. It'll have an effect on the license, depending upon how that business is organized. There may be additional local receipts associated with that inventory. Maybe, maybe not, again, depending upon how they're organized. I mean, it's nominal.
Yeah.
But we voted on, we've had a couple of votes for under $10,000 items tonight that had financial impact. These 2 together may have more than a $10,000 impact on the town a year or 2 from now.
So what are our choices? Recommend, don't recommend, defer, or no financial impact? So of those choices, what fits best for this? I think is maybe the question to think about. And I'm
No
sorry.
number attached to it. There's no effect on the budget.
That's true, there's nothing in the warrant that's got it's got a number to it.
I agree with everything you say, but no effect on the budget, and there's no figure attached to it.
Well, we voted to approve other items that don't have specific figures attached to them tonight. So I understand your point, and there is absolutely no effect on the current year budget. I'll grant you that. But, and please correct me if I'm wrong, our charge is to report out on the budget and to report out on town meeting articles that are going to have financial impact to the town, not necessarily the current year budget, as I understand the charge. And please correct me if I'm wrong.
I agree with that.
It's an interesting question.
I think I would agree with it, just so you know that there's two of us.
Yeah, I know, but you're not
Because
gonna...
we're not just talking about the budget, we are talking about the impact of future budgets and long-term to the town, as well as the immediate budget.
Like a business could open up with the extra license if we get an extra.
Business could open up with the extra license.
This literally meaning
Lanny's
the
could-
difference of the existence of two businesses in town or not.
Exactly.
Which produce tax revenue and additional economic downstream effects.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. All right, so there's no direct financial impact on the operating budget of the town, with the exception of the potential for,
License fee.
Yeah.
And possibly.
well, if people are
receipts.
not drinking on the site, then there should not be any public safety issues.
No.
So it wouldn't affect the budget that way.
Local receipts really wouldn't be either, would it?
No, local receipts
Now
wouldn't
that I
be.
think about it a little bit
No,
more.
because you're not drinking on site.
Right.
Plus, it just opens up two more avenues for getting beer and wine, which is fine, but it doesn't necessarily independently increase the consumption of anything in the town.
No.
So, your point is really good, Peter, about the fact that it will in fact help Lanny Orchards. And like I've indicated, I'm all for helping Lanny Orchards. I just think that this is, to me, does not rise to the occasion of us really having an effect, of actually approving or disapproving.
How about, so this one that's specific to Lanny, we don't make a recommendation on or say no financial impact, but the one that's a general one, I think that one's worth considering for financial impact because of the potential of it. Nothing exists with it right now, so something will come to exist with it.
The counter argument, though, is, I mean, we're not in Lanny's books,
Yeah.
but they could cease to exist without this.
Is it that there?
No, I'm not saying that it is. I'm not saying that it is. We're not, but the counter argument.
You almost had me there.
I wouldn't argue that.
The counter argument, all you gotta do is open the newspaper and realize the financial challenges that all businesses in local agriculture are facing, right? I mean, this is.
Okay, this is,
Retail business.
yeah, we are getting a little bit off topic, because the other thing is that we're not voting to approve this. All we're voting to recommend approval of is the town pursuing a home rule petition.
Correct.
So in that regard, there's no financial impact.
So how about if we vote no financial impact, and then the support is each one of us votes our conscience, which sounds like it will be a yay for the article anyway.
I think, I think that, well, the other option that we have is we can defer, and if somebody at the point of town meeting makes an argument that changes the minds of people who feel like there's no financial impact, because I think the recommendation will not be voted. The recommendation to approve will probably not pass.
To my way of thinking, Peter's had some really good points, and I'm just not ready to, I'd like to wait a little bit to have it simmer or fester, depending on what your choice of words is. And
I think, and it would be worth it, I think that basically, I think that for the town meeting warrant, I think that I'm comfortable with deferring. I think that we can have a more lengthy discussion on October 24th, so that we can hear more from you, because you're not going to be here at the special town meeting, and I know that it's something that you feel strongly about. But I think that if we go ahead and defer, and if an argument can be made and we want to make a recommendation at that time, we can just go in ready with a recommendation. So, if anybody wants to make a motion to that effect, then
I'll make a
Or if
motion.
somebody wants to make a different motion, that's all.
I'll make a motion that we defer our decision to a later meeting.
Well, at this point,
Second.
we'll defer to town meeting, because we
To town
won't be able to
meeting,
make
okay.
anybody aware until, unless
Yep.
But
they
potentially-
tune in to the
Yeah.
finance committee
But
meeting.
potentially, we could walk into
you
town
could-
meeting with a decision already
Yep.
made, we just have to announce it there.
Yep.
Are you planning to put an agenda item for the next meeting that basically reopens this? Is that?
Not that reopens the hearing, but we can certainly discuss.
Revisit some of these
Yes, revisit the warrant
And
articles,
you'll be at
yes.
the next meeting.
Yeah, I'll be
Good.
Yeah, that's my intention.
Good.
Who seconded that?
I did.
Jay,
Jay.
did we vote on that?
No.
Nope, not
No.
yet.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do we want to do the same with R? Or,
I'd like to. I think
Yeah,
that's going to be
I
the
would
easiest
too.
thing to do at this point. I move we defer Article R to town meeting.
I'll second. Jay seconded.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. That was some really good discussion. And again, on the next agenda, we will revisit all of the warrant articles, even though we've already made our recommendations. So if there's something that you've had a second or third thought about, feel free to bring it. But as of what we voted on tonight, that's what's going to be appearing in the warrant itself. Luckily, because this is a special town meeting, we don't have to write a report for the warrant. So you're off the hook.
I wanted the practice.
You can practice it if you like.
Still don't know if you like
Is
it.
that the vice chair's job?
No, would you like it?
No.
I did it last year. She let me do it last year, so.
I think, yeah, it had historically been the chair. And
Okay.
then as vice chair, I did it, and I think that was just Mark's way of saying, I'm leaving, you're up.
Practice.
So when she's the board chair at some point, then, she can either keep it or delegate it. Okay, do we have any town manager or financial officer reports? We don't. They just want to go home. Do we have any comments?
I have a question for the town manager. if
Sure.
Appropriate. Is there an update on the status of the project? Actually, two projects. One is the fuel tanks for the public safety department. I guess it falls under public safety, DPW. I'm sorry.
The fuel tanks we're in the process of getting quotes for the engineering portion. That would be required to go out to bid.
Okay, and the other interest that I have, project that I have an interest in is Pleasant Street. Is that happening still this year, or is that going to happen next spring?
Pleasant
The
Street.
bridge replacement on
Oh,
Pleasant
yes. Will be happening this year. So we had a kickoff meeting not that long ago with the engineering firm that's handling that. So that will be, they've been out doing survey work and that type of work on that.
And
So
we anticipate that the money is adequate for that project?
as far as I know, but you never know until you put
Yeah.
things out to bid.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, so our next meeting's October 24th. We will meet here at 7. October 29th, we will meet at 6:30 in the Middle Senior High School Auditorium.
Yep. That's the Tuesday, right?
That's a Tuesday night, that's correct. And then, prior to that, on the 19th, we're supposed to go to the Ham and Bean Supper at the Eagle House.
Oh, really?
Yes. That would, they will be having that as their fundraiser for the dementia-friendly community.
What date is it?
That's Saturday, the October 19th. It's homecoming day.
Saturday, October 19th, 4 PM to 7 PM.
4 PM to 7 PM.
Yes.
Okay.
Ham, bean, mac and cheese, cornbread, coleslaw, and homemade desserts.
And they're having takeout this year.
Yes.
Awesome.
And the October
Friendly.
29th Tuesday date is what time?
6:30.
6:30.
The Tuesday meeting on October 29th is at
That's,
6:30. Adam will kick us off.
Yep.
And then, if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
That was gonna be-
Thank you.